So we're talking about the skeleton, and the skeleton consists of two parts, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is everything in the axis, like the skull, the vertebral column, and the thoracic cage. This is called the axial skeleton. The appendicular skeleton is anything that's appended to the axis. So like this is the shoulder girdle, this is the upper limb, and this is the pelvic girdle and the lower limb. This is called the appendicular skeleton. We're going to start with the axial skeleton. The axial skeleton is the skull and the vertebral column and the thoracic cage. So we started with the skull. The skull consists of cranial bones. These are the skull bones and the facial bones. The cranial bones are 8. One is the frontal, one in the back. This is occipital. So that's 2 so far. We have 2 parietal. That's 4. 2 temporal. That's 6. And then 1 sphenoidal and 1 ethmoidal. So these are the 8 cranial bones. The frontal bones are these bones in the front, and this is the orbital foramen, the 2 orbital foramina, and you can always start like the bones from here, and you can call it never mindless, NMLES. Can you pause for a second? So if you look at this skull here, this green one here is a frontal. This one brown in the back, this is the occipital. You have 2 parietal, which is the yellow, and this is 2 temporal, which is on either side. And then you have the yellow here, which is the sphenoid, which is this and this. This is just the 2 ends of the sphenoid bone, but the sphenoid bone itself is 1 bone, and it's connected from inside. That's why they call it 1. So frontal, that's 1, occipital, that's 1, so 2. The sphenoid 3, the ethmoid 4, and 2 doubles. This is 2 parietals, and this is 2 temporal bones. These are the 8 cranial bones. The facial bones now, the facial bones will be as follows. You can call it never mind less, LES. Never N, which is the nasal bones, these bones here. The second part will be extension from the maxillary bone, so this is M, which is the maxillary. L, this is the lacrimal, this is the location of the lacrimal duct. N, L, I mean lacrimal. And E is for the ethmoidal bone. And the last one, which is the yellow inside that contain all the foramina here, this is the sphenoid. So N, M, L, E, S, never mind less. These are the bones here. This is the maxillary bone, this is the zygomatic bone, and this zygomatic bone again, and you see this arch, this is called the zygomatic arch. This little part here, which is protruding from the zygomatic bone, this is called the temporal process of the zygomatic bone. This is part of the arch. And the second part, which is the purple here, it's coming from the temporal bone, so this is called the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Those 2 together, which is this part here, this is called the zygomatic arch, 2 parts. And there's a suture in between here, separation in between. So this little part here, temporal process of zygomatic arch, and this large part here, this is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. We also have this bone here, which is the mandible. This is the body of the mandible. This is called the ramus of the mandible, like a branch coming from the body. This is the angle. This is the condylar process, and this is the head. This is the coronoid process. These are the mental foramina. This part is called the mentis, which is the front part of the bone of the chin. So this is called the mental foramina. And if you go back here, this is the nasal bone. And if you look inside, this is the nasal septum inside. This is the bony part. The cartilaginous part is removed because this is only bone. And you can also look inside. You see this one here, which is the inferior meatus. And the second one here is the middle. I mean concha, sorry, not meatus, concha. This is the inferior nasal concha. This is the middle nasal concha. The superior one is hiding up, so we don't really see it. So we can see the middle and the inferior nasal meatus. Pause. Okay. If you look here, you will see separation, sutures, like you're suturing something. Sutures between these bones. This suture right here is called the coronal suture, which separate the frontal bone from the 2 parietal bones. The 2 parietal bones themselves are separated by sagittal suture because it's in the sagittal plane or sagittal section. So this is sagittal and this is in the coronal. So this is coronal, this is sagittal, and this one looks like a lambda. So this is a lambdoid suture that separate the 2 parietals from this occipital. If you look here, this is called a squamous suture, which is separating the temporal bone from the parietal, and this one is called the temporosphenoidal suture, which separates the temporal bone from the sphenoidal bone. If you look at the other parts of the skull, this is called the mastoid process. This is called the styloid process. This foramen here is called the external acoustic or external auditory meatus, which is this one. There's another one that's inside. So this is one end, external acoustic or external auditory, and the other one is inside. If you look at the foramina of the skull, I usually divide it into three parts. The first part is my house just came large. My, this is magnum. House, this is hypoglossal. Just, jugular, this one here. Came, which is this, carotid. And large is the lacerum. So my house just came large. Magnum, hypoglossal, jugular, carotid, and lacerum. The second part is Ross. So my house just came large. Signature, Ross. R-O-S. R-O-S. R is rotundum. You can see it really much here. It's deep. And O is ovale. And the S is for spinosum. So if we do the same thing from inside, just apply the same thing. If you open the skull and look from inside, same thing. This is the magnum, house. This is the hypoglossal. Just, jugular, came, ear, large is the lacerum. So magnum, hypoglossal, jugular, carotid, and lacerum. So my house just came large. And Ross, R-O-S. R for rotundum means round, rotundum.